TV1 රැස්වීදෙන ජීවිතේ.
Hello there, very good evening. This is Primetime News on TV1. We are coming to you live and direct from the Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. Now, a short while ago, President Maithripala Sirisena, speaking in India, said the Elections Commission has noted the presidential election will be held on the 7th of December this year. We have the details of the story coming up shortly. Before that, here are your tonight's headlines.
Mahanayakas of the Malwatu and Askiri chapters and the Archbishop of Colombo issued joint statements opposing any agreement that paves the way for any foreign military force to enter the country. Indo-Sri Lanka leaders reiterate their commitment to work closely towards eradicating terrorism and extremism. Attorney General requests the Supreme Court to appoint a full bench to hear the petition against the IGP and former Defence Secretary. The central bank reduces policy interest rates.
In your top story this evening, President Maithripala Sirisena made an announcement on the dates of the presidential election.
Sri Lanka ඉදිරි ජනාධිපති වරණය තියෙන්නේ.
The presidential election of Sri Lanka will be held at the end of this year. The election will be held on the 7th of December this year. The Elections Commission of Sri Lanka has made a statement to this effect. We still have time for the election. No political party of Sri Lanka has selected a candidate. The government or the opposition has not selected a candidate. So I am not in a hurry. I will wait till the other parties choose to make my decision.
අනිත් පක්ෂ තෝරනකම් මමත් බලාගෙන ඉන්නවා මගේ තීරණයට.
And then making news now in a joint statement, the Malwatu and Askeri chapters and the Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit, strongly oppose any agreement which would pave the way for any foreign military force to enter the country or create base in Sri Lanka.
The statement goes on to note it is the responsibility of the government to enforce a common law for the country whilst banning all extremist organizations in order to bring about sustainable peace rather than entering into such agreements which would further create instability in the country. The joint statement strongly calls for public opinion to be sought if the agreement that affects the independent nature of the country are reached upon with foreign nations, institutions or organizations. The present government established many agreements with foreign countries in a controversial manner, resulting in a threat to our country's sovereignty and non-aligned state. Our country has become a victim of extremism due to leaders acting as opportunists in order to protect their political power. The recent April 21st attacks is a result of the actions of leaders who failed to uphold national security. We have been informed of the present government's attempt to establish agreements with foreign countries. The public appointed a government to govern the country for 5 years and to protect the sovereignty of the country and to maintain national security and not to make such controversial decisions. We vehemently oppose any foreign force and any agreement which would pave the way for any foreign military to enter the country or create a base in Sri Lanka that would harm the sovereignty of our nation.
Former US State Department political specialist Daya Gamage speaking on the Pathikada program aired on our sister Sirasa TV channel this morning expressed the following views.
All policies are decided based on national security. During the final stages of the Obama administration under Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, there was a policy called Pivot to Asia. This policy was further developed under the government of Trump. Trump administration is not one that meddles with the affairs of other countries like the Obama administration. The Trump administration only interferes in affairs that affect their national security, their trade, and their issues of immigration. This is connected to the Status of Forces Agreement. This SOFA agreement has been signed with about 90 other countries. Also, the Acquisition of Cross Services Agreement or ACSA has been signed with about another 100 countries. Under this same agreement, when the US forces went to assassinate bin Laden, they did not even inform Pakistan. According to the statement made by the American ambassador after meeting with the chief prelate of the Malnatu chapter, she said that they are in discussion to sign this agreement. According to the agreement, members of the American forces are coming to the country. They can act according to this agreement. These two agreements can be seen as an instance where America is making inroads to Sri Lanka on a military front. When looking at the geographic location of Sri Lanka, this is also connected to the flow of the American military in the Asian Pacific region. Sri Lanka is highly connected to the United States. One is through the World Bank and the other is with the IMF. With the financial assistance that they provide, Sri Lanka in a way is drawn into foreign policy of the United States. If foreign forces are being given diplomatic immunity and they can act the way the American ambassadors say they can, then it is in a way a violation of the country's sovereignty. When there are administrative issues in a country, the entry of foreign forces into the country are considered as secondary. Another thing is, since 2015 and 2016, there was an issue in Diogo Garcia. Diego Garcia is an area owned by the Mauritius government. The residents of this island were removed and it was given to America to be used as a base. There was a court order to remove the American base from the area. I'm not saying that when the American base is removed from the island, Sri Lanka would become an American base. But what they don't say is that this will be a US military hub. If you look up the word military hub in the dictionary, you could understand what exactly this is. That means they will be using Katunayaka, they will be using Trincomalee and Hambantota. This actually happened in July 2017. The agreement that was signed to be in effect for more than 10 years, the acquisition of cross-services agreement, was increased from 9 pages to 83. No one knew about this. I think that this government is a very weak government. In 2015 October, a resolution was brought in Geneva. The resolution states that foreigners must inquire into allegations of war crimes in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka agreed to this. The US was always holding on to human rights and the rule of law issues in Sri Lanka. What has happened is that we are not maintaining an equilibrium between these. National security and human rights as well as rule of law must be brought into an equilibrium. What the previous government did was they maintained a high level of national security and human rights were in a lower level. With the American and European influence, human rights were maintained at a higher level while the national security in the country went down. It was when the national security in the country dropped that ISIS came into the picture. At that point, when ISIS came in, the American military presence had also spread across the Asia Pacific. That is what Sri Lanka has been caught in right now.
ඇමරිකාවත් ඇවිල්ලා මේ ආසියා ශාන්තිකර සාගරයේ මිලිටරි ප්‍රසාරණය. ඉතින් ඕකට තමයි දැන් ලංකාව මේ මෙදියට.
U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs R. Clark Cooper is due to arrive in Sri Lanka next week to discuss security, counterterrorism and other matters of mutual interest.
According to the U.S. Department of State, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs R. Clark Cooper will travel to Singapore, India and Sri Lanka between the 29th of May to the 7th of June 2019. In Sri Lanka, Assistant Secretary Cooper will meet with government officials and think tank experts to discuss security, peacekeeping, clearance of landmines and unexploded ordnances, counter-terrorism and other areas of mutual interest. The US top official is also scheduled to visit Singapore and India during his tour to South Asia. In India, Assistant Secretary Cooper will hold talks on defense cooperation and peacekeeping, two key areas of a rapidly developing US-India partnership as envisaged in the administration's Indo-Pacific strategy. US-India bilateral defense trade has risen from virtually zero in 2008 to $15 billion today. The State Department said, quote, talks will focus on supporting India's role as a major defense partner, expanding our security cooperation and furthering opportunities for American industries, end quote. In Singapore, the Assistant Secretary will join Under Secretary of State for Arms Control and International Security Andrea L. Thompson on a delegation of senior US officials led by Acting Secretary of Defense Patrick M. Sharmanan for the Shangri-La Defense Dialogue, a forum for exchanges among defense and security policy professionals from across the Indo-Pacific region. Assistant Secretary Cooper will also meet with senior civilians and military officials from countries around the globe to discuss US partnerships in regional security, maritime security and defense trade efforts that contribute to a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region.
More on headline making news. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with Sri Lanka's President Maithripala Sirisena in New Delhi this morning.
During a bilateral meeting, President Sirisena congratulated the Prime Minister on the reassumption of office following the resounding victory of his party in the recently held general elections and reiterated his desire to work together to strengthen relations between the two countries for peace, prosperity and security in our region. The press release issued by India's Ministry of Foreign Affairs states that Prime Minister Modi thanked President Sirisena for attending the ceremony and also for his good wishes. He conveyed his government's continued commitment to further foster friendly bilateral ties with Sri Lanka. The leader noted that terrorism and extremism continue to pose a threat to humanity and committed to closer bilateral cooperation for peace and security in South Asia and the Indian Ocean region. Meanwhile, Indian media reported that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will visit Sri Lanka in June this year. It adds that during his first visit overseas in his second term, Narendra Modi will visit the island after visiting the Maldives.
Now, Minister Sagala Ratnayake expressed the following views with regard to developing the eastern terminal at the Colombo port as a joint project between Sri Lanka, India and Japan.
A memorandum of understanding regarding the eastern terminal at the Colombo port was signed. The Sri Lanka Ports Authority will retain control of the terminal. The terminal will be developed by us. We will be the owners of the terminal. We will obtain a concessionary loan from the government of Japan to finance this development. This loan will have a 40-year payback period at concessionary interest rates. We will also establish a company to manage operations at the terminal. The Ports Authority will own 51% of the shares in this company, and the remaining 49% will be sold to companies proposed by the Indian government and the government of Japan. The MOU was used to further discuss matters relating to the sale of shares. We have appointed a working group to discuss this matter and present it to the cabinet. This is what was achieved through the MOU.
Working group
Now, further on this slide, the All Ceylon General Port Employee Union has made a request from the President to cancel the memorandum of cooperation reached with regard to the East Terminal with India, Japan and Sri Lanka.
The trade unions point out in the request they have made from the President that the longevity of the port will be affected by handing over the only deep water terminal that can handle a large number of ships to two other countries. They also point out that during the past 40 years, the governments that were in power have taken steps to privatize ports, terminals and land and other important property that belong to the Sri Lanka Ports Authority. And these actions have not yielded any positive results.
More development news now. Sri Lanka has entered into an agreement with a Chinese company for the construction of a 33-kilowatt electricity power line. The project is funded by a loan from the Asia Development Bank.
The project will be constructed under 7 phases. Under the 4th phase of the project, 600 kilometers of power lines will be laid, and the total cost of the project is $70 million. The funds have been allocated for the project under the loan scheme of the Asian Development Bank for the development of the power distribution sector in the country. The Asian Development Bank will provide $42 million out of the total cost of the project, while the rest has to be funded by the government.
We roughly need about 1,200 kilometers of transmission and distribution lines in the next 2 to 3 years. I was very happy to hear that generating the capacity of St. Teresa's is able to quicken the speed of what we thought from transmitting from 2 years to roughly about 1.5 years. And I'm sure you'll have a challenging task ahead if you really sit and discuss with the CBT.
Presidential Commission of Inquiry probing fraud and corruption over the past 4 years recorded statements from witnesses over the alleged misappropriation via the Suraksha health insurance policy.
The Presidential Commission to inquire into allegations of fraud and corruption during the past 4 years is headed by retired Supreme Court Justice Upali Aberatna. The testimony of the Education Ministry Director Renuka Piris revealed when granting the tender to a private establishment, the ministry did not consider the advisory. The alleged misappropriation had taken place when the tender was being awarded to a private company from amongst the Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation and 2 private insurance companies. Although it is the duty of the Technical Assessment Committee to assess the capital capacity of the selected insurance companies,
a private insurance company with a total capital of only some 1,000 million rupees, was selected for the project over Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation, which has a total capital of 27,000 million rupees. It was revealed that the differences in the capital capacity had not been cited in the technical or financial report of the student insurance policy project. When the head of the Technical Assessment Committee, Renuka Piris, was questioned as to why these figures were not included in the reports, she said that although certain facts were considered, some of them were not included in the reports. The chairman of the Presidential Commission, Upali Aberatna, made a statement advising the witness that the reports should be prepared with the relevant citations and not according to one's whims and fancies. It was also revealed that the Technical Assessment Committee had paid little attention to the number of branches of the insurance company, the company's financial potential, and the institution's affiliation to the government. The Technical Assessment Committee had evaluated the affiliation of the insurance company with the government based on primary requirements such as being registered under the insurance board. The witness accepted that if the proper facts were considered adequately, the company that was selected for the project could have been different.
Now, as mentioned in your headlines today, the Monetary Board of the Central Bank has decided to reduce the standing deposit facility rate and the standing lending facility rate of the central bank by 50 basis points to 7.50% and 8.50% respectively. During a media briefing, the governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, said the growth projections for 2019 is likely to be revised.
Now, when we met last in April, we had projected growth for this year at 4%. Now, after the events of recent weeks, that figure is likely to be revised downwards. The impact of the heinous bombings, as well as some of the civil disturbances in its aftermath, as far as our reserves are concerned, on the 18th of April, we projected that our reserves at the end of this year would be 8.2 billion. So if one looks at a worst case scenario, tourism, which was expected to bring in $5 billion this year, the latest projection is that it would bring in about 3.7 billion. Another area where there could be losses is the foreign institutional investment in the rupee-denominated government securities market. At the moment, as I said, there's been only a net 77 million outflow, but let's assume there's a 300 million outflow. Then the other area where we could have a lower flow than anticipated is foreign direct investment. The number at the beginning of the year was $2.7 billion. Let's assume that number comes out 700 million less. So 900 million tourism, 300 million foreign institutional investment, and say 700 million of foreign direct investment. You add all that up, it comes to 1.9 billion. You end up with about $6.3 billion as reserves that could be there at the end of the year under this worst case scenario.
The central bank predicts that the 2019 economic outcome is going to be even worse than what we had 2018. And the political elite tend to put the blame on the recent attacks on this dismal economic performance. This is not quite the case. If you look at the figures, economic performance is primarily being measured in what we call economic growth, how rapidly the economy is expanding its production of goods and services. And if you look at that, it tells a different story. Since 2015, our economic growth has been falling rapid. Now we are hitting in 2018 3.2%, which was 5% in 2015. And this systematic fall has affected everything in the economy. This clearly indicates to us that there has been major problems with regard to the way the economy has been managed over the last 4 years. It has been the case in the past, whenever economic situation goes down or are in some kind of trouble, the politicians tend to point fingers at the bureaucrats. Given the worst situations that have been created by the political decisions and the mismanagement of the economy.
The EPF grows at the rate of 300 billion rupees a year, right? It's a 2 trillion fund, so there is 300 billion of investable resources. Now, the government's borrowing requirement is coming down. So we have to find avenues for investing the EPF's funds. Clearly, the stock market is one such avenue. It is true there were some problems with that. So we have had some internal inquiries. 2 of the forensic audits are into the operations of the EPF. So when these are completed, we would need to see what action has to be taken. Then, in terms of the processes and procedures, there is an investment committee, an investment oversight committee, the deputy governor, 2 assistant governors, all of them have oversight over it. And the investment committee meets on a daily basis, so nobody can make decisions on their own. There can't be rogue traders operating. In addition, things like CCTV, voice recordings, all those things have been introduced so that we have a greater monitoring of what is going on in terms of investment activity. There is greater transparency because from now on the investment operations of the EPF, including the stock market operations, will be put on the EPF website on a quarterly basis. So everybody can see what has happened. Also, before investing, the EPF officers will put a paper up to the monetary board to get approval of the companies in which they're going to invest. Because in the past there were issues about unlisted companies, etc. So now there's a process whereby the companies within which the EPF will invest will get approved by the monetary board. So there are lots of checks and balances that have been put in.
රාජපක්ෂ පවුල් පාලනය මේ අරමුදල කොල්ල කෑව කොටස් වලින් පොලේ දාලා එදා
The Rajapaksa regime misappropriated the EPF by investing the funds in the stock exchange through pumping and dumping scandals. It was during the period between 2008 and 2012 when the pumping and dumping was very popular. The EPF lost 28 billion rupees during the past 4 years. They are trying to boost the stock exchange by using the funds from the EPF. Now the internal dealers have resumed operations. The Rajapaksa regime, together with Aloysius, misappropriated the funds of the EPF for their political campaigns. The Vikramasinghes, together with Arjun Mahendran and Aloysius, defrauded the central bank for their political campaigns. Now once again, the Vikramasinghes are trying to misappropriate the funds of the EPF for their election campaigns. We urge them to stop these investments immediately. Interest income reduced as the government imposed taxes. The government is trying to steal from the EPF by imposing taxes and misappropriating its funds.
Still on local news, Attorney General Dapula de Oliveira today requested the Supreme Court to appoint a full bench inclusive of the Chief Justice to examine the petitions filed naming IGP Pujit Jayasundara, who was sent on compulsory leave, and ex-Defence Secretary Hemasiri Fernando as respondents.
The request was made when the petitions were called before Justices Sisara Diabru, Gamini Amarasekara and Mrudu Fernando. The petition requests an order be made on the Attorney General to file legal action as per the provisions of the criminal law against former Defence Secretary Hemasiri Fernando and the IGP Pujit Jayasundara for being aware of the April 21st attacks and failing to take action. The petitions were filed by the relatives of those who perished in the April terror attacks. Senior Additional Solicitor General Bersana Jamil, appearing for the Attorney General, requested for a full bench as matters of national importance are mentioned in the petition. The bench decided to forward the request to the Chief Justice and decided to call for the petition again on the 6th of June.
Now, money and equipment used by Mohammed Zaharan, who is behind the April 21st terror attacks, were discovered today.
Mohammed Zaharan යනායගේ කල්මුනේ සම්බන්ධිකාරක වශයෙන්
Police was able to arrest an individual who was operating as the Kalmune coordinator of Mohammed Zaharan on the 22nd. We were able to discover 3.5 million at the residence of the wife of the suspect located in Palamune, Akaraipattu. More hidden money worth 5 million was found following the arrest of the suspect. Officers at the Ampara Police Division were able to discover a laptop in the Palamune Akaraipattu lagoon based on the information received from the suspect following interrogations and with the assistance of the officials of intelligence units. This laptop is currently under police custody. It has been revealed through investigations carried out that this has been used by Zaharan. More investigations regarding this are being carried out.
කරුණු අනාවරණය වෙලා තිබෙනවා. ඒ වගේම තොරතුරු ලැබිලා තිබෙනවා. මේ පිළිබඳව වැඩිදුර විමර්ශන සිදු වෙනවා.
The Dr. D.M. Amaratungagama Udagamane in Kabithiko Lavanradapura was open to the public today. This is the 194th village built under the Samata 7 Yalipibidana Udagamana program.
This village was opened by Minister of Housing, Construction and Cultural Affairs Sajid Premadasa. The village consists of 25 houses. The village, which includes houses equipped with all facilities, was constructed at a cost of 29.7 million rupees. The ownership of the houses, housing loans, Virusumituru housing loans and Shilpa Savya benefits were presented during the program today. How much gratitude do they have in this political framework? Citizens appoint us as politicians and give us a good life. People have a hope that the government they appoint will take care of them. How many politicians have shown gratitude towards the people? I think this is an issue. If we ask 10 pedestrians about politicians, they say that they are thieves.
Professor Jayampati Vikramaratne, a member of the Parliamentary Select Committee appointed to look into the April 21st terror attacks, expressed these views at a media briefing held today.
The two witnesses who provided evidence were well versed in the field of national security. We made it clear to them that if there is anything that is detrimental to national security, they should not reveal it. Inform us about it. As chairing member on that day, I was always ready to stop the cameras from recording the proceedings in an instant. This proposal that was presented was signed by about 40 MPs from the opposition. The opposition MPs are not participating in the proceedings of this select committee for an entirely different reason. If a member of a responsible authority or a public representative did not act even when intelligence reports were available on the April 21st attacks, when evidence is being heard before the committee on that matter, it does not in any way harm national security.
බුද්ධ්‍යංශයේ ප්‍රධානියා කවුද කියලා මුළු රටම දන්නවා. ටෙලිෆෝන් ඩිරෙක්ටර් එකක් කරන් බලන්න ඔක්කොම ආරක්ෂක අමාත්‍යාංශය නැත්නම් පොලිසිය වෙබ්සයිට් එකට ගියාම දන්නවා මේ නිලධාරීන් කවුද කියලා. බුද්ධ්‍යංශයේ පල්ලෙහා මට්ටමේ වැඩගෙන ඇත්තටම බුද්ධිය එකතු කරන නිලධාරීන් ඒ ආදී කැඳවලා නැහැ කවුරුත්. විධායකය ඕන කරලා විධායකයේ යම් වරදක් සිදු වුණා කියලා රටට පෙන්වන්න ගන්න උත්සාහයක්. විධායකයේ වරදක් කරලා තියෙනවා නම් ඒ ලිදරෝවිය විධායකයේ වරදක් කළා නැත්නම් එහෙනම් ඒකත් රටට දැන ගැනීම හොඳයි. ඔබතුමා ජනාධිපතිතුමාගේ සහාය අරගෙන තමයි ඔබතුමාලා 19 වෙනි ආර්ථික ව්‍යවස්ථා සංශෝධනය කෙරේ. ඔව්. එතකොට එතනදී ඔබතුමාලා පෙන්නුවේ එකක්. කිව්වේ එකක්. හැබැයි අවසානයේදී ව්‍යවස්ථාදායකයා විධායකයා අතර ලොකු ගැටුමක් ඇති වෙන තැනකට දැන් ගෙනල්ලා තියෙනවා. ඉතින් මේකට මුල් වෙලා තියෙන ඔබතුමා. එහෙම ඔබතුමා අනිත් එක ඔබතුමා ජනතාවට ඡන්දෙ නෙමෙයි යන්නේ. ඔබතුමා ජාතික ලයිස්තු මාර්ග කරේ. මම සම්පූර්ණයෙන් පිළිගන්නවා 19 වෙනි සංශෝධනයේ තවත් වෙනස්කම් කළ යුතුව තිබුණායි කියලා. ඒක හැදුවේ මම නෙවෙයි. මම ඒකට සහභාගී වුණා. ඒක හැදුවේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුව. ඔබට පුළුවන් ගවේෂණාත්මකව සොයා බලන්න අපේ ක්‍රියාකාරකම් ගැන. ඒගොල්ලන් කරන්න තිබුණා ඇත්තටම මේ කාලේ. කළ යුතුවක් තිබුණා. කොහොම හොඳයි. මට මතකයි අපි මේ අණ්ඩුව හදන්නත් ඉස්සෙල්ලා ඔක අපි යෝජනා කරලා තිබුණා. හැම කමිටුවක්ම මම 19 වෙනි සංශෝධනය හදනකොටත් මම අදහසක් ඉදිරිපත් කරුවා. නමුත් ඒක වැඩි බරපතල ලෙස කවුරුත් ගත්තේ නැහැ.
In this press conference, Dr. Jayampati Vikramaratne at one instance says that he was not involved in the drafting of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. At another instance, Dr. Vikramaratne contradicts himself and says that he was in fact involved in the drafting process of the 19th Amendment. On a press conference held on the 22nd of January 2019, Dr. Jayampati Vikramaratne spoke about the meeting that they had to formulate a new constitution.
ඇත්තටම ඩ්‍රින්ක්ස් කරන කට්ටිය ඩ්‍රින්ක් කරන කතරම ඩිනර් රැස්ම හදන්න කියන්නේ. ඔව්. කාමරයකට යන්නේ ඉන්ඩස් පන්සියකට ගන්න.
Is this how important decisions that would affect the country are made? Against this backdrop, are the public to believe that TNA MP M.A. Sumantiran did not participate in the drafting of the 19th Amendment?
Sri Lanka will be playing their first match in the ICC Cricket World Cup 2019 against New Zealand tomorrow. Will the Lions be able to defeat the Black Caps? News First's Martin Sathanesan filed this report.
Carrying the expectations of 22 million people, Sri Lanka will commence their World Cup campaign against New Zealand in Cardiff tomorrow. Sri Lanka have had the better of New Zealanders in World Cup matches, winning 6 of the 10 matches played, while New Zealand won 4. Incidentally, this will be the 4th time the two sides play against each other in their first World Cup encounter. The first such instance was reported in 1979, where New Zealand beat Sri Lanka by 9 wickets in Nottingham. The two sides met again in the 2003 World Cup in South Africa, where Sri Lanka won the match at the back of a brilliant Sanath Jayasuriya century. New Zealand beat Sri Lanka by 98 runs, when the two sides met at the 2015 World Cup in Christchurch. Overall, the two sides have met 98 times in ODIs. 41 of those matches were won by Sri Lanka, while New Zealand won 48. One match ended up in a tie, while 8 of them ended without a result. News First caught up with former Sri Lanka cricketer Parviz Maharouf for his take on Sri Lanka's chances tomorrow.
For the first game against New Zealand at Cardiff, the combination I like to see is 6 batsmen, 4 fast bowlers and a spinner. The 4 fast bowlers, 2 genuine fast bowlers, 2 fast bowling all-rounders, and then 6 batters. I think that one of the top 6 should be able to bowl, and as well as 1 spinner coming in the middle overs and tidying things up and hopefully get some wickets for us. And talking about the venue, Cardiff generally is a small ground, it's a good wicket to bat on. If the overcast conditions is gloomy, it's one of the wickets where it seams and swings, so it's going to be interesting to see what conditions we're going to get tomorrow. But overall, New Zealand team is a very good team, all-round team. They've been playing really well in the last year or so, especially in one-day cricket. So it's a tough task for us to beat them. But if we play to our potential, I think we have a good chance. And overall, I think the preparation has been really good of our boys. So hopefully they'll start the World Cup very well.
In more sports news, pride is on the line as Royal and Trinity lock horns for the 75th Bradby Shield in a matter of few hours. News First, Muad Rasik reports.
From humble beginnings in 1945, former Royal Principal Edward Lawrence Bradby would never have imagined his visionary idea would one day become the blue ribbon event of Sri Lanka's school rugby. 1970-79 is considered the golden decade of rugby at Royal. They produced many great players and teams under the tutelage of 2 of the greatest Royal coaches, Mahesh Rodrigo and Summa Navaratnam, once regarded as Asia's fastest man. The ultimate was winning the Bradby, that's the holy grail. Trinity under the captaincy of Ashan Ratwata were victorious in 1983, the 100th encounter where the chief guest was Edward Lawrence Bradby himself. The encounters in 1992 and 2016 ended in a draw. Zulki Hamid's record-breaking Royal side won the Bradby with an aggregate of 83-0 in 2002. Royal have been dominant in the recent Bradby history as the Shield remains at Reed Avenue since 2015. It was back in 2014 Trinity last had their hands on the Bradby under the captaincy of Tharinda Ratwata.
75 uninterrupted years, the blue ribbon of Sri Lanka school rugby.
Initially my prediction was Trinity to win the first leg by 5 points or lesser. But under these circumstances, I'm even leaning towards a draw. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see who makes the lesser mistakes. The first 20 minutes of the game will determine the outcome, because we'll know who's done the work, who's done the preparation. So at the Royal College Complex, or Reed Avenue, what I call Jurassic Park, Royal have a 12-game-to-6 advantage. So they've gone 2-to-1 ratio. Royal always play excellent rugby at home. Trinity, can they come down to Colombo and hang on to that lead, extend it and win the Shield? I'm not so sure. This is where Royal are very good. They play that structured game. Overall, I think Royal will win this year's Shield, but it's too close to call, purely because there's been such a big break and we don't know exactly until we see how they play in the first leg, how they're going to respond to this.
So will the Bradby lie at Reed Avenue for the 5th consecutive year, or will Trinity take it back to the hills? That is the question.
And with that note, we bring this edition of Primetime News to a close. And remember, to stay ahead, you need to stay close to News First. So just simply log on to our website, that is www.newsfirst.lk. I'm Tarushi Kumar Singh. Have yourself a great and a safe Friday night.
TV1 රැස්වීදන ජීවිතේ.
That because of our students are going abroad for medical education to other countries, that we should have private medical education in Sri Lanka. When a patient comes to you, you take a clear history, a detailed history. There are some people who